Nigerian businesses are facing a perfect storm of rising costs. Energy prices continue to soar, making it increasingly difficult for companies to power their operations. The financial landscape is also challenging, with interest rates climbing and access to capital becoming more restrictive. This, coupled with the rising cost of raw materials and labor, is putting immense pressure on production costs, posing significant threats to the long-term sustainability of Nigerian businesses. Well, I caught up with Oyeyimika Adeboye, the Managing Director of Cadbury Mondelez, during the just concluded Nigerian Economic Summit, and this was what she had to say about the pressing issue. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we're looking at the business climate in Nigeria. First, what do you make of it at this point?
It's a tough climate right now for all operators. I don't think I know anyone in the industry right now who isn't going through one challenge or the other. Telecoms, we heard earlier on telecoms talking about what they're facing. Manufacturing is facing a lot of challenges. Even the financial services sector, with all the new policies going on today, with changes in rates of exchange, small businesses are struggling, big businesses are struggling. So it's across board.
Absolutely. So how is your company affected, especially being in the FMCG? Because we see a lot of listed companies, and when they talk about their, when they release their results, we are alarmed and we're wondering, how are you coping?
I don't think we're coping, the way people say we are coping, because I guess, you look at resilience of companies and you look at what they have in terms of structure, and maybe that's what is keeping companies going. We're a publicly quoted company. So what I share here is in public domain. We have huge borrowing in FX because, at the time when we were not able to source FX, being a highly import-dependent company, we've had to borrow money to pay for our suppliers, and now we have to try and pay back. But when you borrow when the exchange rate was 400 naira, you're now paying back at an exchange rate of 1,600, 1,700 naira. Your P&L gets hit with a massive exchange loss impact, and that then takes its space on your P&L. The reality is if you look at a lot of operations, people are leaving Nigeria. Companies are leaving Nigeria, not because they don't want to stay, but because, they can't take it. The appetite for Nigeria is big, and it depends on how much risk you can hold on to, or you can cope with, that will determine how long you can hold on to Nigeria. That's the reality of today's market. How are we coping? Juggling many things and making sure that those things keep us going is how we're coping, ranging from, we talked about FX. We probably are more import dependent. How do we change that narrative is a question we ask ourselves. How do we become more local ingredient independent? And how do we become the exporter? Because also that is the place to be, to export, to earn the FX for your country. Those are the things that we ask ourselves. But I think the journey to there is a longer journey and would require more than just us as one business to do that. There's a lot more to do in that space.
You've asked so many questions, and for me, I'll be wondering who is supposed to take the front seat. If we're talking about we need to turn from, having just primary goods, because that's what I hear. We're having a lot of primary goods, primary commodities that are impacted by global shocks. We need to move away from there and get to, maybe production, manufacturing, where we have goods that are not necessarily impacted as much as these other primary goods are impacted by, volatility and external shocks. So talk to me, who should take the driver's seats when we're talking about that?
I would say in this space, you have two drivers. You cannot have one driver. Everybody keeps saying government. And yes, government does have a responsibility, but we in the private sector also have a responsibility. I think the key to this thing working is if both parties work together, take the matter seriously, and do what is right, I think we would win. I think what happens today is that there's a lot of talk and there are initiatives, but each party is working at their own pace. And what the private sector is expecting is not what the government is doing. What the government is expecting is not what the private sector is doing. And therefore, we're driving this massive, what I call a massive juggernaut engine with cross purpose at times. We need to talk together and work together and be serious about what we want to do. And I think we would make that progress. Let me give you a classic example. You talk about small businesses in the financing. Finances from banks, but banks are regulated. So how do we get to the place where, for example, we are able to make those small businesses, because they are the ones that are going to make this locally sourced ingredients. If I talk about my own industry, the ingredients that we need that we believe people can make in Nigeria. We're not going to make it because we don't make ingredients. We make chocolates, we make biscuits, we make beverages, we make gum, we make candy, but we don't make the ingredients. How can we get the people who make those ingredients, just as we are buying it from whether it's China or England or Germany, how can we make those ingredients here in Nigeria? We're not looking to make 100% ingredients, but how do we change the narrative, even if it's 50%? But you approach businesses and they say, I want to do it. I have a proposal in my hands, but I don't have financing. So how can they get access to financing is one example. How can they get incentives to encourage them from government, whether it's tax breaks or